why I'm hawkish about North Korea from someone who's been there. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I'm going to talk about North Korea, why it is that I am so hawkish on North Korea, want to take a very hard line against North Korean behavior and to respond forcefully against their provocations as someone who's actually spent time in North Korea. Now, I'm not purporting to speak for everyone who's been to North Korea, but from my experience, it is an incredibly unreal, dark, dystopian place, right? From the moment you're born until the moment you die, you experience one message, and that is valorizing and sanctifying the leadership, right? There's no foreign media, there's no internet, there's no Coca-Cola ads, there's no McDonald's or anything. It's just that one message. And the country is organized in a nationwide cult to that effect. So a few things about the North Korean people and just make observe. One thing that surprised me was just how normal everybody seemed. If you speak to them, ask them about their family, make jokes, they're very funny, very contemporary, very witty, just ordinary people, right? They talk about, their hope for their children, their plans for the future, things they like and dislike. Ordinary, great people, very much reminded me of South Koreans, except when it comes to the leadership. When it comes to the leadership, there is a rewiring of the mind. And the weird thing is I began to understand why. So the first couple of days I was in North Korea, I'm like, tick this box. This place is crazy. Everything about it is just nuts. Everything's fake. Everything's a facade. Everything's for show. Everyone's afraid of everything. You're being managed and watched constantly. I could tick that box, done, right? But after a while, I started to understand that the North Korean people are genuinely happy as a rule, but for the worst reasons. So when I was sort of there for, a week and a half, I'd built up really close relationship with my minders, and I was, having a discussion with some senior officials. And I was asked by this girl, what does the rest of the world think of our leaders? Now, in North Korea, you can actually talk about just about anything. You can talk about the nuclear program. You can talk about, the conflict with China and just anything you like except criticize the leadership. If you do that, they can't guarantee your life, right? So there I am in this situation, and I'd built up a lot of trust. I didn't want to be dishonest. And so a few things about these people. One, they were elites. Like, they could speak English. They had access to foreign currency. They had access to phones and drivers and things like that. And they were, at least, even though they hadn't necessarily traveled the world, they had been educated in different parts of the world. They knew things about Australia. They knew things about the United States. And so they also knew that their country is poor. But they have explanation for it. The explanation is US sanctions, imperialist oppression, the fact that the North Korean people are making sacrifices to liberate the southern, puppet state, so to unify the Korean peninsula. So they know they're poor, but their explanation is that they're taking a noble, more virtuous path. So they asked me, what does the rest of the world think about leaders? And I said, well, you know how I'm from Australia and we change the government regularly. Well, that's what most countries around the world will do. They have regular elections and they change the governments frequently. And if people aren't doing well, if people are hungry, if services aren't being provided, then people blame the government, right? And therefore they expect the governments to make changes, or we change the government. And because that's my experience, that's because it's the experience of most people around the world, they look at North Korea through that lens. They know the people are poor and therefore don't think of the North Korean leadership in, a high light, right? That was my answer. And the people in the vehicle, there's about 10 of us, it was a large sort of bus. They sort of got really upset and they accepted my explanation, but they were visibly in pain. They were just like, oh, okay. And then she's like, but okay, what explanation do they have for why we love our leaders so much? These are not dumb people. This is an infinitely harder question. And so I said, well, not me, of course. I'm here seeing for myself. But there is a perception around the world that perhaps secretly North Korean people don't love the leader that much, but are afraid of the consequences of speaking out against the leadership. Anyway, they burst into tears. This woman grabbed my leg and she's like, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. Kim Jong-un, he works so hard. He does everything for his people. He gives everything away. He works 22 hours a day. We're so worried for his health. It's us. We're the problem. If only we could live up to his great vision, the country would be doing great. And it's so upsetting to know that the world blames Kim Jong-un for our failure. So in North Korea, they don't blame the leadership for things going wrong. They blame themselves. And I kind of, after a while, began personally to understand the pull of totalitarianism and what cult of personality can mean. So, as I said, first couple of days, I was like, this place is nuts. But after not even that long time, maybe 10 days or so, I really got that feeling, because in North Korea, from the moment you're born, you're told that there's someone there just for you, that loves you no matter what. And it's not some god you have to, like, they're slightly divine, of course, but they're not something you have to believe in. It's someone you can see, feel, and touch. And even though they're perfect in every way, and you're not, you're just an ordinary person, that's okay. Because as long as you do your best and do your duty for the state, then they're going to love you anyway and take care of you, right? And so North Koreans are genuinely happy because they feel in the womb, if you like. They're not exposed to the real vicissitudes of life. And they have absolutely no conception of the scale of the disparity between their everyday malnutrition and starvation and disease and privation and what South Korea is, for example. So they just think that everything is perfect because they've been told that their entire lives. And if something is imperfect, it's because they're imperfect and they should atone for their personal mistakes. So this went on for a while, and at the end of the trip, I was kind of given this sort of honor they can bestow on a foreigner, which is a trip to the Palace of the Sun. Note the kind of religious language. The Palace of the Sun is where they keep the bodies of the former leaders, so Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. And they're preserved through that sort of Russian technique that they preserve Lenin, so the bodies, you actually can physically see them. And you go through this, it's like a full day thing, and you go through this huge amount of ritual. So you go down all these corridors filled with awards that were bestowed on these people from universities that don't exist and from countries of dubious repute. You hear all these stories about things that they could never have done, heroic deeds that, of events that weren't a real thing. And then eventually you get to the first chamber, and you're there with a whole bunch of military officials, and you kowtow like the ancient, Sino-centric form. You do bows and scrapes. You put your head right to the floor, and you do this for both Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. And then on the way out, I was making conversation with this person who I'd come to know very, very well. And I was just making casual conversation. I said, oh, how many times have you been? Anyway, she turns around and she has tears flowing down her face. And she's like, oh, it's my first time. Now, of course, I was used to unusual things in North Korea by this time. Everything about that place is upside down. But it is a little bit strange that the person who's your guide hasn't been to the place that you just went to, being the guide. And she's like, no, you don't understand. You can't just show up to the Palace of the Sun. You need to be nominated by your peers as worthy of paying respect to the departed leaders. It goes before a panel of experts, and then they decide whether or not you have the opportunity to go and participate in this great honor. And I said, well, if it's such a great honor, why are you crying? And she started talking, and then she started falling into hysterics as she spoke and started to lose breath and hyperventilate. She's like, I'm just so upset that our dear leaders have left us. Like, they were such great men. They achieved extraordinary things, and now we're all alone. And what are we going to do? And she started rambling and shaking. Anyway, by the way, Palace of the Sun is like the most protected place in North Korea, right? There are very serious people with very serious weaponry. And they're looking at this random white guy and this fine, upstanding North Korean girl who's now a wreck, kind of wondering, when they get to shoot me. And anyway, so I had the most conflicted moment of my entire life. I will never have something that approaches this, but it is dead truth. I gave her a big hug and I said, don't worry. Kim Jong-un has inherited all their great qualities and will carry on the glorious revolution. It's an incredible place. And people who treat it like just any other country with the same calculations of things just have no idea. None whatsoever. And so people that are sanguine about this country having nuclear weapons, saying that they'll behave normally and rationally, they don't understand what that country's about. And so we can't indulge them as if they are any other country on the world stage. They're not. It's a nationwide cult. It's not a real nation. In North Korea, there's no such thing as North Korea. North Koreans don't know what North Korea is. For North Korea, it's just Korea, right? Artificially divided, and that the entire country is a movement. It's not a nation, right? It's that every person's duty is to help liberate the South Koreans from their imperial oppressors. And to that end, all of society is organized that way. I'll put a picture up. When I met these three young girls sweeping before a statue, I just asked them, "Oh, is that your school uniform?" And they looked at me blankly and they're like, "What's a school uniform?" All girls wear that same clothing until the age of 20. And then they swap out that red scarf for a badge. That badge will tell them where they sit in the social hierarchy, because it always has the leaders, but they have different colors and so forth. Everyone wants to be a Korean Workers' Party member because that's the highest echelon of North Korean society. That's where you'll get access to restaurants and foreign languages and so forth. Being a guide in North Korea is an incredibly high status profession because you're dealing directly with foreigners and you can speak foreign languages. That's a very big deal. Unreal. And boys have obviously their equivalent. In North Korea, so much is tied to your family history, and your the only way you can kind of improve your standing is through sort of exemplary service to the state. Much easier to go down and be sent to a gulag, and North Korean concentration camps and things like that are not the way we would imagine a typical prison. The value of human life is incredibly low. There was that defector who drove across the DMZ. He was a sergeant in the military, so pretty high status in North Korean terms, and he was absolutely malnourished. Dozens of intestinal worms were dug out of him, like when the surgeons were removing the bullets. That's North Korean life. It's a litany of horror. The food I was eating there was terrible, and I was eating the best food that they could possibly have created. The quality was abysmal. So that's the kind of the nature of the state. And then there are some practical things I wanted to kind of mention. that people who think that we can tolerate a nuclear North Korea never seem to be able to answer one question. And this is something that I would ask the general populace. Let's say North Korea fires missiles at Japan. Not nuclear, just regular missiles, because they have every reason to, and they often do, right? That sort of, not this particular thing, but this sort of thing. Let's say that they fire some missiles at Japan and they kill 1,000 people, right? Well, how does the United States and the rest of us respond to that? Okay, if North Korea has dozens of nuclear weapons, long-range ICBMs, the ability to hit the United States itself with a hydrogen bomb, what exactly is the response? How do you prevent that from happening? What this does is it gives North Korea the cover to do things that are impossibly intolerable. And what I've said is at the lower scale. What if North Korea nuked Guam, right? And the Americans then had to go to war with North Korea, but at the cost of tens of millions of Americans in their home country? Well, I think they would reconsider that, to be honest. So North Korea is incredibly useful for China in that respect, because they can give the West a bloody nose without, having things brought back on themselves. And our acquiescence to this, because we are afraid of the consequences and cost and risk of doing something about it, is just cowardice. And it's pushing this incredible problem just a few years down the line. Like, we will pay the price for our inaction, just as we've already paid the price of the inaction of those in the 1990s who had an opportunity to dismantle North Korea's nuclear program and failed to do so. So we just keep withdrawing the line. Like, the line was, no nuclear test. They do a nuclear test. Okay, no successful nuclear test. Okay, we move the line there. All right, no hydrogen test. Well, they do that. We move the line back. Okay, no marrying of missiles to nuclear weapons. They do that. We move the line back. When exactly are we going to do something about this? And I'll just leave you with this point. When North Korea does, as they invariably will, do a long-range intercontinental ballistic missile nuclear test, i.e. they fire a missile thousands of kilometers and detonate a nuclear device somewhere, hopefully over an ocean. That will put them in the category of just the United States, Russia, and China, the only countries that can do that, and North Korea. Now, if something intuitively is wrong about that, it's because we have allowed something to metastasize to a deadly, deadly cancer. And this is a leader who poisoned his own brother in a busy international airport in Malaysia with VX nerve agent, brazen in public. I mean, come on, get real. This is not people that you understand. These are the jokers of the world. Right? So that's my view, and that's my experience and the profound human effect that it has had on me. But I would very much like your opinion. Please do comment on it. I'm happy to answer questions about my time in North Korea. I've physically been on the American ship that was the Pueblo that was captured by North Korea. That was the American vessel. If you know anything about that, I can talk about that. Plenty of other things. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.